Homology and development, continuation of the previous video. So, homology and development. One of the most compelling lines of evidence supporting the common ancestor of species is that of similar structural elements across functionally diverse forms. It becomes evident from comparative anatomy. We find the same bones in many different types of animals, but these bones are often modified to do different things. The hopping legs of the frog contains the same bones as our own leg, but the frog's legs are highly modified to fulfill a different functions. Hopping. The wing of a bird with the forelimb of a bat contain exactly the same bones as the arm of a human, but the size, shape, and even internal structure of these bones are all adapted to play a different role in each animal. We call structures like the wings of a bird and the forelimbs of a bat homologous structures. Homologous structures are structures that are derived from a common ancestor. Even if they are superficially different, they are developmentally related. Homology does not mean that these structures must share the same function. Human, frog, bat, porpoise, and horse. Homologies between the forelimbs of four mammals and frog, showing the ways in which the properties of bones have changed in relation to the particular way of life of the organism. But very often in nature, we find structures that are superficially similar, even though the organisms are completely unrelated to one another. These structures may even serve the same function, like flying and described as analogous structures. The wing of the bird and the wing of an insect are good examples of analogous structures. In every physical and biological way, these wings are radically different from one another. One is a flat plane of exoskeletal material, and one is a chordate forelimb shaped into an airfoil with hollow internal bones and an outer covering of feathers. But they can both be used to fly. The observations of structural homology support the causal hypothesis of evolutionary homology that common structural organization results from common ancestry. The evidence of analogous structure further support the evolutionary homology concept as they indicate that design is not necessarily constrained. That is, there is more than one way to build a functional part. Similarly, during intrauterine development, human embryos and fetuses exhibit characteristics of other vertebrates, which suggest that humans are related to other forms. Then, vestigial structures. Many species show structural or genetic features that serve no apparent function. Obvious examples of these include the presence of pelvic bones in snakes and whales, rudimentary eyes in some cave fish species, presence of nictitating membrane in human, and the presence of pseudogenes throughout the genomes of eukaryotes. The structure suggests strongly that the species have changed over time and descended from an ancestor with different ecological or genetic characteristics. A related phenomena suggesting descent with modification is evidence of poor engineering or insufficient or inefficient design in some characteristics of organisms. For example, gene regulation is often a very inefficient process with multiple, often conflicting stages. This observation suggests that existing structures are often adopted using evolutionary changes to serve new functions. That is, there are descent with modification as opposed to the independent design of each species. And the fossil record and biogeography. In the early decades of the 90s, the modern synthesis unified the concepts of Darwinian evolution with the principles of Mendelian genetics and observable patterns in fossil record. In particular, George Gerald Simpson demonstrated that the fossil record was consistent with an evolutionary model of the history of life. The support of evolution in geology came in several forms. First, we can observe the existence of transitional forms between major groups of organisms. This include Archaeopteryx and other bird-like reptiles and tetrapsid reptiles, which suggest the transition between reptiles and mammals. In addition, the layers of fossil strata are concordant with these evolutionary transitions. Finally, the biogeographic distribution of extinct and extant forms is consistent with our understanding of both plate tectonics and vicariant events, as well as our estimates of the genetic relationship of species. Then, biogenetic law. Ernest Haeckel studied embryology, and his dictum called ontogeny recapitulates to phylogeny, called the biogenic law, also called the theory of recapitulation. Ontogeny is the embryological development process of a species. Phylogeny is the evolutionary history of species. Haeckel espoused the view that Evolution generally proceeds by placing each innovation on top of previous one, like adding layers on a cake. Therefore, the embryo of an advanced organism should pass through recapitulation, the adult stages of more primitive forms as it develops. However, repeated observations of development in our workers like William Hess, Walter Gaston, and Wilhelm Rocks, Adam Sedgwick, then Gindeber, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, then clearly showed that embryos do not go through adult stages of lower forms, rather, they share many common features in development. For example, the human embryo at one point seems to have gill slits in the neck, thought by Haeckel to signify a fish like stage in development. However, gill slits are not gills, and the similarity is not an actuality. In reality, the gill slits develop into a lower jaw in mammals. And natural selection. A composite of all the forces that cause differential survival and differential reproduction among genetic variants. When the selective agencies are primarily those of human choice, the process is called artificial selection. When the selective agencies are not those of human choice, it is called natural selection. Evolution is a biological mechanism that is driven by natural selection. A composite of all the forces that cause differential survival and differential reproduction among genetic variants is called a selection, and the selective agencies are primarily those of human choice. The process is called artificial selection. When the selective agencies are not those of human choice, this is called natural selection. Evolution, as a natural biological mechanism, is driven by natural selection. This theory is favored by many scientists to explain phenomena in nature, so much so that it is generally assumed as factual in most studies. Natural selection is the machine that drives evolution. This mechanism causes those organisms that are abnormal to survive and environmental change, making them a new normal. Then over time, according to the theory of evolution, this can cause an organism to change into a totally different form of life. Some evidence of natural selection has been seen in nature, but not to an extent that would change a species. An organism has resulted in land handicap or death. It does, however, mean that an ecosystem is vulnerable to rapid change, since organisms that cannot adapt will usually die. Then evidence of natural selection. Industrial melanism. Industrial melanism is a phenomenon that affected over 70 species of moths in England. It has been best studied in the peppered moth, Biston betullaria. Prior to it, in the typical moth species had a light color pattern. Dark-colored or melanic moths were rare. During the industrial evolution, soot and other industrial waste darkened tree trunks and killed off lichens. The light-colored moth becomes rare and the dark-colored moth becomes abundant. In 1890, the first dark-colored moth was seen, melanic. By 1886, it was far more common, illustrating rapid evolutionary change. Eventually, light-colored moths were common only a few locales far from industrial areas. The cause of this change was thought to be the selective predation by birds, which favored camouflage coloration in the moth. Then Darwin's finches. Darwin finches are a group of 14 species of small birds, 13 of which occur on a Galapagos island. This group of Darwin finches are a group of 14 species of small birds. Darwin finches, we just learned, are 14 species of small birds, 13 of which occur in Galapagos Islands. This group of birds provide one of the most striking and best studied example of evolution on islands. The Galapagos Islands are a particularly striking natural laboratory of evolution. The islands are all